Welcome back to NFL Weekly Recap, in which today we are covering Week 5 of the 2024 season. Let me know in the comments below, who do you guys think will win their matchups in Week 6 next week? If you like this type of content, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and I appreciate all the support as we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. Let's start off with Week 5 with the teams on bye. We have 4 teams on bye this week, including the Philadelphia Eagles, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Tennessee Titans, and the Detroit Lions. So let's head into the first game of the week, which is Thursday Night Football. It was a divisional matchup in the NFC South between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons, in which the Falcons won in overtime 36-30. Both teams are 3-2 heading into Week 6. Baker Mayfield went 19 for 24 with 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. Rachaad White led rushing with 72 yards, and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans both had 64 yards and 62 yards respectively. Mike Evans also had 2 touchdowns on the day. Kirk Cousins, Kirko Chains went off as he had 42 for 58 attempts, 509 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. Bijan Robinson led rushing with 61 yards, and both Drake London and Darnell Mooney had 154 yards and 105 yards respectively. London had 1 touchdown and Mooney had 2. Both teams scored touchdowns on their first drive, with the Falcons scoring first. It was Tampa Bay that led with a field goal right after, followed by a exchange of touchdowns as the Falcons led 14-10, and then the Buccaneers answered back with a touchdown of their own to make it 17-14, and in the second quarter, the Falcons tied it up 17-17, with the Buccaneers scoring the final points of the first half with a touchdown, taking a 24-17 lead heading into halftime. Both teams scored field goals in the second half, and Atlanta tied the game at 27 early on in the fourth quarter. Tampa Bay took a 3-point lead thereafter on the next drive, and it wasn't until the end of regulation that the Falcons were able to tie it up with a field goal, and the Falcons got the first possession in overtime, and that is all they needed, as Kirk Cousins had a pass made to Hodge for 45 yards and a touchdown, and thus the Falcons beat the Buccaneers 36-30 in overtime. What a great Thursday night game we had right there. Next game of the week was played way early on Sunday morning. The first London games of the year between the New York Jets and the Minnesota Vikings, maybe also known as the Winnesota Vikings, as they are 5-0 to start off the season as they beat the Jets 23-17. The Jets are now 2-3 heading into Week 6. Aaron Rodgers went 29 for 54 with 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Garrett Wilson had 101 yards and a touchdown on the day. Allen Lazard also had a touchdown for the Jets. Sam Darnold went 14 for 31 with 179 yards and an interception. Justin Jefferson had 92 yards on the day. The Vikings scored the first points of the game on their first drive with a field goal, and then Aaron Rodgers threw a pick six at the end of the first quarter. The Vikings then scored another touchdown and took a 17-0 lead over the Jets, and it wasn't until the final drive of the first half that the Jets were able to get into the end zone as we headed into halftime, with the Vikings leading 17-7. In the late third quarter, the Jets scored the first points of the second half with a field goal to cut the Vikings' lead to 17-10. The Vikings then scored a field goal in the fourth quarter to take a 20-10 lead, followed up by a Jets touchdown a few drives after. The score was then 20-17, with the Vikings following up with a field goal right after to make it 23-17. And on the final drive for the Jets, Aaron Rodgers threw a interception to seal the game as the Vikings won 23-17. The next game of the week was between two divisional opponents in the AFC North. It was between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals, where the Ravens beat the Bengals 41-38 in overtime. The Ravens are 3-2 and the Bengals are 1-4 heading into week 6. Lamar Jackson went 26 for 42 with 348 yards and 4 touchdowns. Derrick Henry rushed for 92 yards and a touchdown on the day, as Zay Flowers had 111 yards on the day. Charlie Kolar had a touchdown. Rashad Bateman had a touchdown. Isaiah Likely had 2 touchdowns for the Ravens. Joe Burrow was efficient on the day, going 30 for 39 with 392 yards and 5 touchdowns to 1 interception. Chase Brown had 46 yards rushing, and Jamar Chase had 193 yards with 2 touchdowns. T. Higgins had 83 yards with 2 touchdowns on the day. The Ravens scored the first points of the game with a touchdown on their first drive, and it wasn't until early second quarter that the Bengals scored a touchdown of their own to tie the game. The Ravens then answered with a touchdown of their own a couple drives later, and Cincinnati got a safety thereafter on the Ravens. The score was then 14-9. On the final drive of the first half for the Bengals, they got into the end zone and scored a 2-point conversion. Heading into halftime, the score was Cincinnati 17, the Ravens 14. It was then a shootout to start off the second half as the Bengals scored 3 touchdowns and the Ravens followed up with 3 touchdowns of their own. At that point, Cincinnati was leading 38-35, and it wasn't until the final drive of regulation that the Ravens scored a field goal to tie it up at 38 and take it into overtime. In overtime, Lamar Jackson fumbled the ball, and it was recovered by Pratt on Cincinnati's defense, and then McPherson missed a 53-yard field goal, and Justin Tucker was able to win the game with a 24-yard field goal as the Ravens beat the Bengals 41-38. The next game of the week was between two divisional opponents in the AFC South, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Indianapolis Colts, in which the Jaguars beat the Colts 37-34 to get their first victory of the year. They are 1-4, and the Colts fall to 2-3. Joe Flacco took over for the injured Anthony Richardson as he went 33 for 44 with 359 yards and 3 touchdowns. Trey Sermon led rushing with 38 yards and a touchdown, and Alec Pierce had 134 yards with a touchdown of his own. Mo Alley-Cox had a touchdown, and Michael Pittman Jr. had a touchdown as well. Trevor Lawrence went 28 for 34 with 371 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Tank Bigsby went for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie out of LSU, had 122 yards and a touchdown, and the tight end Brenton Strange had a touchdown on the day as well. The Colts scored the first points of the game on their first drive with a touchdown, and it wasn't until early in the second quarter that the Jaguars were able to score with a field goal, and then they scored a touchdown on the drive right after, followed up by a Colts field goal to tie the game up at 10 in the second quarter, and the Jaguars on their final drive of the first half got a field goal to lead 13-10 heading into halftime. In the middle of the third quarter, the Jaguars scored a touchdown to push their lead up 20-10. It was then followed up by another touchdown by the Colts to cut the lead down to 3, followed then by another Jacksonville Jaguars touchdown and the score was 27-17 in favor of the Jags, and both teams started to score points as the Colts followed up with a field goal, and both teams scored a touchdown right after. The score was 34-27 in the fourth quarter, and the Colts tied the game up at 34 with 2:40 remaining in the fourth quarter, and it wasn't until the final drive for Jacksonville that they kicked a 49-yard field goal with 17 seconds remaining. And thus, at the end, the Jaguars beat the Colts 37-34. Next game of the week was between two AFC East divisional opponents, the Miami Dolphins and the New England Patriots, in which the Dolphins beat the Patriots 15-10. Miami are 2-3 to start off the season, while the Patriots fall to 1-4. Tyler Huntley took over for the injured quarterbacks on the Dolphins and went 18 for 31 with 194 yards and an interception. Jalen Wright led rushing with 86 yards, and Tyreek Hill had 69 yards, and Jonnu Smith had 62 on the day. Jacoby Brissett went 18 for 34 with a 160-yard. Ramondre Stevenson led with 89 yards and a touchdown of his own, and Demario Douglas led receiving with 59 yards on the day. The Dolphins scored the first points of the game with a field goal on their first drive, and then the Patriots scored a touchdown late in the first quarter, and it was lots of missed field goals by both teams in the second quarter, and we headed into halftime with the score of 7-3 in favor of the Patriots. The Patriots got the ball to start off the half and scored a field goal, and once Miami took over on the next drive, they scored a field goal of their own to make the score 10-6. The Dolphins then scored a field goal and a touchdown on two consecutive drives to take a 15-10 lead with just about 4:24 remaining in the fourth quarter, and they managed to hold on for the rest of the game to give us the final score of 15-10 with the Dolphins beating the Patriots. The next game of the week was between the Washington Commanders and the Cleveland Browns, in which the Commanders beat the Browns 34-13. The Commanders are 4-1 to start off the season, and the Browns fall to 1-4. Deshaun Watson went 15 for 28, had 125 yards and a touchdown. Jerome Ford had 47 yards, and Deonta Foreman had 44 yards. Amari Cooper led the team with receiving as he had 60 yards on the day, and Jordan Akins had a touchdown on that day. Jaden Daniels went 14 for 25 with 238 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, and Jaden Daniels led rushing as he had 82 yards, and Jeremy McNichols had a touchdown on the ground, and Brian Robinson Jr. had 2 on the day. Terry McLaurin led receiving with 112 yards, and De'Ami Brown had 57 yards and a touchdown on the day. The Commanders scored the first points of the game with a touchdown late in the first quarter, and in the second quarter, the Browns were able to score a field goal, and the Commanders answered right back with a field goal of their own as they took a 10-3 lead. Right on the next Commanders drive, they scored a touchdown, and as well on the drive right after, 2 consecutive touchdowns in a row as they took a 24-3 lead over the Browns heading into halftime. The Browns scored on their first drive a field goal to make it 6-24. It was then followed up by a Commanders touchdown, which increased their lead to 31-6. And on the drive right after, the Commanders scored a field goal to push their lead up to 6-34. And it wasn't until the final drive of the Browns that they scored their first and only touchdown on the day to give us the final score of 34-13. Next game was between two heavy hitters in the AFC. It was the Texans versus the Bills, in which the Texans beat the Bills 23-20. The Texans are 4-1 to start off the year, and the Bills fall to 3-2. Josh Allen went 9 for 30 and 131 yards and a touchdown. James Cook had 82 yards rushing and a touchdown on the day, as Keon Coleman led receiving as he had 49 yards and a touchdown on the day. CJ Stroud went 28 for 38 with 331 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, and Cam Akers led rushing with 42 yards and a touchdown. Diggs had 82 yards, and Nico Collins had 78 yards and a touchdown on the day. The Bills scored the first points of the game with a field goal on their second drive. It was then followed up by 2 consecutive touchdowns by the Texans on the 2 following drives, as they took a 14-3 lead, and on the final Houston drive of the first half, they scored a field goal to push their lead to 17-3 heading into halftime. The Texans then got the ball first in the second half and scored a field goal to push their lead up to 20-3. It was then followed up by 2 consecutive Bills touchdowns to make it 20-17. With 3:18 left in the fourth quarter, the Bills were able to tie the game up at 20 with a field goal, and following the final drive for the Texans, they were able to get a 59-yard field goal by Kaimi Fairbairn as time expired, and the Texans beat the Bills 23-20. Next game of the week was between the Carolina Panthers and the Chicago Bears, in which the Bears won 36-10, as the Bears are 3-2 to start off the year, and the Panthers fall to 1-4. Andy Dalton went 18 for 28 with 136 yards and an interception, and Bryce Young went 4 for 7 for 58 yards. Chuba Hubbard led the team in rushing with 97 yards and a touchdown, and Jalen Coker led the team in receiving with 68 yards on the day. Caleb Williams went 20 for 29 with 304 yards and 2 touchdowns, and DeAndre Swift had 73 yards and a touchdown on the day, and DJ Moore went off as he had 105 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. The Panthers scored the first points of the game on their second drive as they scored a touchdown. It was followed up by 2 consecutive touchdowns on 2 consecutive drives by the Bears to make it 7-14. And on the final 2 Bears drive in the first half, they scored 2 consecutive touchdowns to take a 27-7 lead over the Panthers heading into halftime. Both teams exchanged field goals in the third quarter to make it 10-30, and then to cap it off on the second to last drive of the game, the Bears scored a touchdown to give us the final score of 36-10. Next game of the week was between 2 AFC West divisional opponents, the Las Vegas Raiders and the Denver Broncos. The Broncos beat the Raiders 34-18, as the Broncos are 3-2 to start off the year, and the Raiders fall to 2-3. Gardner Minshew went 12 for 17 with a touchdown and 2 interceptions, and in the third quarter, he was benched in favor of Aidan O'Connell, who went 10 for 20 with 94 yards and an interception. Amir Abdullah led the team in rushing with 42 yards and a touchdown, and Brock Bowers led receiving with 97 yards and a touchdown of his own. Bo Nix went 19 for 27 and had 206 yards and 2 touchdowns. Javonte Williams led the team with rushing at 61 yards, and Bo Nix had a rushing touchdown of his own. Javonte Williams also led the team in receiving with 50 yards, and Josh Reynolds had a touchdown, as well as Jaleel McLaughlin on the Broncos. The Raiders scored a touchdown on their first drive of the game and scored a field goal right after, followed up by a Broncos field goal, and then Gardner Minshew threw a pick six in the second quarter to get the game all tied up at 10. And on the final Broncos drive of the first half, they capped it off with a field goal as they took the lead 13-10 heading into halftime. On the second drive of the second half, the Broncos capped off with a touchdown drive as they took a 20-10 lead over the Raiders and scored a touchdown on the fourth quarter as well to take a 27-10 lead over the Raiders, followed up by another touchdown on the next drive as they took a 34-10 lead. The Raiders followed it up with a touchdown of their own to make it 18-34, and both teams did not score towards the end of the game as the Broncos beat the Raiders 34-18. Next game of the week was between two NFC West divisional opponents, the 49ers and the Cardinals. The Cardinals beat the 49ers 24-23 as both teams are 2-3 heading into week 6. Kyler Murray went 19 for 30 with 195 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. James Conner led rushing with 86 yards, and Kyler Murray had 83 yards and a rushing touchdown. Michael Wilson led the team in receptions as he had 78 yards on the day, and Elijah Higgins had scored a touchdown for the Cardinals. Brock Purdy went 19 for 35 with a touchdown and 2 interceptions on the day. Jordan Mason had 89 yards, and Brandon Ayuk led the team with receiving with 147 yards, and George Kittle had a touchdown. Jordan Mason also lost a fumble for the 49ers on Sunday. The Cardinals scored the first points of their game on their first drive, taking a 7-0 lead. The 49ers followed it up with a field goal on the next drive and a touchdown on the drive right after to take a 10-7 lead over the Cardinals in the second quarter, and then both teams followed it up with field goals of their own, and the 49ers led in the game 13-10. And on the next Cardinals drive, they had a blocked field goal which resulted in a touchdown return by the San Francisco 49ers special teams unit. And on the final drive of the first half, the 49ers capped it off with a field goal of their own as they took a 23-10 lead over the Cardinals heading into halftime. The Cardinals scored a field goal and a touchdown in the late third quarter and in the early fourth quarter to cut the lead down to 2 as the score was then 23-21. And with a minute 37 left in the fourth quarter, Ryland scored a 35-yard field goal to give the Cardinals a 24-23 lead over the 49ers, and Brock Purdy threw an interception on the final drive as the Cardinals held on to that lead. Next game of the week was between the Los Angeles Rams and the Green Bay Packers, in which the Packers beat the Rams 24-19. The Packers are 3-2 to start off the year, and the Rams are 1-4. Jordan Love came back as he went 15 for 26, had 2 touchdowns and an interception on the day. Josh Jacobs led the team in rushing with 73 yards and a touchdown. Tucker Kraft led the team in receiving with 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. Matthew Stafford went 29 for 45 with 260 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Kyron Williams had 102 yards and a touchdown on the day, as Jordan Whittington led the team with 89 yards, and Demarcus Robinson scored a touchdown receiving on the day. The Packers scored the first points of the game with a touchdown on their second drive. The Rams were able to tie it up at 7 in the second quarter, and then Jordan Love threw a pick six late in the first half. The Rams then lead 13-7, and then Jordan Love and the Packers cap it off with a field goal to end the half as the score was 13-10 in favor of the Rams. The Packers score a touchdown on their first drive of the second half, followed by another touchdown on the drive right after to take a 24-13 lead. The Rams scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter to get the score of 24-19, and both teams did not score points after that, in which the Packers beat the Rams 24-19. Next game of the week was between the New York Giants and the Seattle Seahawks, in which the Giants beat the Seahawks 29-20. The Giants are 2-3, and the Seahawks are 3-2 to start off the year. Heading into Week 6, Daniel Jones went 23 for 34 with 257 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tyrone Tracy Jr. had 129 yards and led the team in rushing. Darius Slayton led the team in receiving with 122 yards and a touchdown, and Wan'Dale Robinson had a touchdown as well for the Giants. Geno Smith went 28 for 40 with 284 yards and a touchdown. Geno Smith led the team in rushing with 72 yards, and Tyler Lockett led the team in receiving with 75 yards on the day. Jackson Smith and Jigba had a touchdown on the day as well. The Seahawks scored the first points of the game with a fumble return touchdown on the Giants' first drive on the day. In the second quarter, the Giants were able to score a touchdown to make it 7-7, and in the final minutes of the first half, both teams exchanged field goals as we were tied at 10 apiece heading into halftime. Giants, on their second drive of the second half, scored a touchdown, and then both teams exchanged field goals on the next couple drives as the Giants led 20-13 over the Seahawks, and then on the next drive, the Giants scored another field goal to make it 23-13. In the fourth quarter, the Seahawks scored a touchdown to cut the lead to 3 as the Giants led 23-20, and then the Giants defense came up clutch as they had a blocked field goal touchdown as they took a 29-20 lead over the Seahawks with just under a minute to go in the fourth quarter, and that gave us the final score of 29-20, in which the Giants beat the Seahawks. Sunday Night Football was between the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers as the Cowboys beat the Steelers 22-17. Both teams start off the year at 3-2 heading into Week 6. Dak Prescott went 29 for 42 with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Rico Dowdle led the team in rushing with 87 yards, and Jalen Tolbert led the team in receiving as he had 87 yards for 1 touchdown. Rico Dowdle also had a touchdown receiving as well. Justin Fields went 15 for 27 for 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. Najee Harris led the team in rushing with 42 yards and led the team in receiving with 35 yards. Connor Hayward and Prop Freiermuth both had a touchdown each. The Cowboys scored the first points of the game on their first drive with a field goal. It was then the Steelers that answered with a field goal of their own to tie the game to 3-3. It wasn't until the second quarter that the Cowboys got another field goal as we headed into halftime with the Cowboys leading 6-3. The Steelers got the ball to start off the second half as they scored a touchdown on their first drive, taking a 6-10 lead over the Cowboys. The Cowboys then answered back with a touchdown of their own to start off the fourth. They took a 13-10 lead over the Steelers heading into the fourth quarter, and then with just about 4:56 remaining in the fourth quarter, the Steelers answered with a touchdown of their own as they took a 17-13 lead over the Steelers. The Cowboys then answered back with a touchdown on their own on their final drive of the game. With 20 seconds remaining, they took a 20-17 lead over the Steelers, and the Steelers came up short on the final drive as the Cowboys beat them 22-17. The final game of the week was Monday Night Football between the Kansas City Chiefs and the New Orleans Saints. The Chiefs beat the Saints 26-13 as they head into Week 6 5-0, and the Saints fall to 2-3. Derek Carr went 18 for 28 with 165 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Kamara led the team in rushing with 26 yards, and Rashid Shaheed led the team in receiving with 86 yards and a touchdown. Foster Moreau also had a touchdown on the day. Patrick Mahomes went 28 for 39 and had 331 yards and an interception. Kareem Hunt led the team in rushing with 102 yards and a touchdown, and Xavier Worthy also had a touchdown rushing. Juju Smith-Schuster led the team in receiving as he had 130 yards on the day. The Chiefs scored the first points of the game on their first drive with a touchdown, followed up by a field goal a few drives after. They led the game 10-0 in the second quarter, and after that, the Saints scored a touchdown of their own to cut the lead to 3 as the score was 10-7. The Kansas City Chiefs then responded with 2 field goals on 2 consecutive drives. Heading into halftime, they took a 16-7 lead over the Saints. To start off the fourth quarter, the Saints scored a touchdown to cut the Kansas City lead to 3 as the score was then 16-13, and then the Chiefs scored a touchdown and a field goal on the next 2 consecutive drives as they took the final score of 26-13. That recaps all the games for Week 5 in this 2024 NFL season. Let me know in the comments below, who do you guys think will win the games in Week 6, and what do you guys think the score will be? If you like this type of content, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and I appreciate all the support as we are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. If you're a fan of the NFL and college football, stay tuned as we'll be covering both all season long. Appreciate all the support, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.